Hello, good evening. Sorry, first of all. എൻ്റെ മനസ്സിൽ എപ്പോഴും അത് 2 മണി എന്നത് തോട്ടിലായി പോയി. ഞാൻ പറയുന്ന വെറുതെ ബുക്കൊക്കെ വായിച്ച് നോട്ട്സൊക്കെ വായിച്ച് നിൽക്കുമായിരുന്നു. മെസ്സേജ്. സോറി അബൌട്ട് ദാറ്റ്. കുറച്ച് നേരം പോസ്റ്റ് ആയതേ. കേൾക്കാമല്ലേ? ഹലോ, ഗുഡ് ഈവനിങ്.
Good evening, sir.
All right, so we'll shoot करेंगे. We'll start. So we were giving an intro to environmental factors and factors distributing animal and plant distribution. That is environmental factors that was there. And within environmental factors, we talked about habitat being the primary thing. Habitat is also determined by many things, and within that, the environmental factors we are looking at. We had talked about an idea that was given by Shelford. Shelford talked about the range of tolerance, the minimum level and the maximum level, which the audio is working fine. Yeah. So Shelford was talking about sharing കിട്ടുന്നുണ്ടോ? ഇല്ലേ?
കിട്ടുന്നുണ്ട്.
Okay. Fair enough. So yes, so Shelford's idea, he gave this idea about the tolerance range, that is the minimum and the maximum. It can be there, and different species are there of different nature. So one more thing I would like to add here was that this is the tolerance level, and we said beyond the tolerance level for each animal there will be region of stress, environmental stress, right? And the animals will not be able to live here. That's we studied about. So anyway, this is the area of environmental stress, and the organisms will not survive there. Now, with respect to environmental factors, we can look into a couple of factors which are very important, which are most important for plants and animals, right? So there are few we can look at. We have said that already, that we have temperature, rainfall or water availability. Let's write here. A couple of factors are there. One is sunlight. The other is water availability. And the third one, that is temperature. So all of these have its own impact based on the the minimums and maxima, which will determine the type of life that you find in a particular region. Now, if you look into sunlight specifically for our discussion, sunlight has different elements. Obviously, sunlight just on area. Sunlight is important for plants, mostly for plants to get their to do photosynthesis. That is most necessary. In fact, all these environmental factors affects plants the most, and animals the second. Okay. Now, based on the sunlight, there are different aspects to sunlight. There is quality of sunlight, there is intensity of sunlight, and there is duration of sunlight. All these elements it affects, for example, mostly in the case of plants, if you look at differently. So this quality is about which spectrum of light you are getting. If you're getting green light or blue light, things like that. So green is the most suited for what photosynthesis, right? Intensity would be remain what how much intense sunlight you are getting. Maybe if you move into the you can see in the case of tropical and polar region. In tropical region, you have uh, high density sunlight. So the trees would be adapted to that conditions, what you call as heliophytes. And in the polar conditions, low intensity, and it will be adjusted to plants which are plants will be adjusted to xeophytes. Will be adjusted to low intensity or less light. Plants require lesser light to conduct their photosynthesis. That is known as a xeophyte. So the heliophytes would be having in this essentially the tropical plants would be having essentially larger energy production. They will produce more energy, respiration, and total energy. Whereas the xeophytes will be having producing lesser amount of energy, and their respiration will also be less. So their energy requirement itself is less. In the other case, like the tropical plants, they produce more energy and they also consume more energy. But in the net, if you look at it, we say in environment they are ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ productivity ഉള്ള regions ആണ് what you call as the tropical region. Why? Because they get more intense sunlight. And then you have duration of sunlight. Duration of sunlight is basically talking about photoperiods. So in the polar regions, long days and short nights, and also short days and short nights. But in summer, it's just long days. So whereas in the tropical region, you mostly have short days or short days of hours. So long days are found in polar regions. In tropical, you have comparatively short days. So the plants there are associated with those kind of conditions. Okay. Now, as far as animals are concerned, animals are not much influenced by sunlight, very limited in fact. So in fact, the influence of sunlight on plants is direct, and in fact, in the influence of uh, plants on sunlight on animals is less limited. Okay, so this is basically broadly we can say whatever about sunlight will be hugely significant for plants, and based on that you have different type of plants, like for example heliophytes and xeophytes is one example. So we'll write a few things about sunlight. We are looking at environmental factors which determine the distribution of plants and animals around the planet, right? So first one, sunlight. Sunlight is the primary source of energy for the functioning of ecosystem. Which is used by the primary producers. Is used by the primary producers to produce food. Right. It affects distribution of plants in three manners. Sunlight affects the distribution of plants in three manners: quality of sunlight, intensity of sunlight, and duration of sunlight.
Quality, intensity, and
yeah. Meeting ഓഫാക്കി എവിടെ തോന്നുന്നു നമുക്ക് ആ ഗ്യാപ്പ് കൂടെ പറഞ്ഞു തീർക്കാം. ഹെഡ്സെറ്റ് മാറ്റി headset. Okay, quality. First of all, we write about quality of sunlight. The composition of sun's rays behave as a the quality of sun rays behave as a limiting factor in the growth and distribution of plants. Okay. Take an example. Let's explain this to an example. Example of what you call as the tropical rainfall. For example, TRF. If you look at, there will be different plants, different canopy of plants would be there. So there will be three canopy of plants in TRF, and this would be well covered. It would not be like this. So that is likely not right. Let's write it. No, okay. Now there would be plants which are green, which are huge, which will be extending over a long region. Then there will be plants which are lesser green. These huge plants would be there. Besides that, there would be small plants which are second level would be there, which are again taller. And there would be the third level of plants which would be a little more, or rather you can say shrubs would be there. Right. So this would be the condition. Now each of them would be getting different sunlight. So the sunlight which are reaching to the lower parts would be obviously the sunlight which are reflected and coming. So this would be not the exact green color would not be there. Reflected light would also would be there only. So the lower plants would be having different kind of nature. So that's what we are going to write. Example: a dense forest ecosystem. In a dense forest ecosystem, the direct sunlight reaching ground is less than 1%. Tropical rainforest ഒക്കെ നോക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ നമുക്ക് അടിയിൽ ഭയങ്കര ഡാർക്ക് ആയിരിക്കും, നിറച്ച് ടോപ്പ് കനോപ്പിയിൽ നമ്മളൊരു ട്രീസ് രണ്ട് കനോപ്പി ട്രീസും നിറഞ്ഞു നിന്ന് കഴിയുമ്പോൾ താഴോട്ട് പിന്നെ അധികം സൺലൈറ്റ് വരത്തില്ല. Dense forest ecosystem, the direct sunlight reaching ground is less than 1%. So it is diffuse light that is reaching the ground. The main part of the light has already been absorbed by plants and the higher canopy plants. So in adaptive mechanism, the plants on the ground, develops pigments other than chlorophyll to produce for photosynthesis. Okay, the plants on the ground develops pigments other than chlorophyll for photosynthesis, and hence shrubs on the ground level displays different colors than the higher canopy trees. Green ആയിരിക്കത്തില്ല, green അല്ലാത്ത വേറെ colors produce ചെയ്യും. Okay, so that's an adaptive mechanism because the quality of sunlight which the visible spectrത്തിലുള്ള sunlight ആണ് മുകളിൽ കിട്ടുന്നത്, but താഴോട്ട് വരുമ്പോഴത്തേക്കും diffused ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഭംഗിയ കളറാണ് ലൈറ്റ് ആണ് കിട്ടുക. So the plants accordingly adjust their colors. The pigments have changed, new pigments, different pigments are produced, which will allow the plants to produce energy. Now the second one is B, is intensity of sunlight. Primary productivity is the rate at which, so we first talk about primary productivity. Primary productivity is the rate at which carbohydrates are produced in plants. And primary productivity in turn is dependent upon primary productivity of a plant is dependent upon intensity of the sunlight received. Intensity of the sunlight received. Greater sunlight would mean greater intensity of sunlight would mean greater intensity of okay, greater intensity of sunlight would mean greater primary productivity. So greater intensity of sunlight would mean greater primary productivity. Okay. Now, based on energy intensity, plants can be classified into two categories: heliophytes and xeophytes. UPCR asked questions of these kind of classification. Earlier, they had a question about xerophytes. Xerophytes was a classification on the basis of water availability. So, a 10 marker this was on 15 marker. So, if you are in 10 marker, UPC can ask these kind of names by write a note on heliophytic and xeophytic plants, or write a note on intensity of sunlight on plants, so something like that. So heliophytes are plants which require large amount of sunlight, and xeophytes are plants require lesser sunlight, lesser density of sunlight. Now, why this is happening? We can also explain that plants spend majority of their energy by respiration. Plants spread majority of their energy by respiration. Since plants cannot locomote, they adjust their rate of respiration according to the availability of sunlight. As primary productivity varies with location. Okay. Now this is heliophytes. This is xeophytes. But here, energy production is low, and since energy production is low, the respiration rate is also low. Here, the energy production is high, and rate of respiration is also high. Now, one more point you can write is that from equator to poles, the intensity of sunlight declines. From equator to poles, the intensity of sunlight declines, and as a result, plants have to adapt to their environment by reducing their rate of respiration. Plants have to adapt to their location by reducing their rate of respiration. Hence, plants of higher latitudes are xeophytes, and plants of lower latitude are heliophytes. What you call as a tropical polar. Okay. Now, one more point is there. We'll write that too quickly. That is duration. Many aspects of behavior of plants are affected by duration of sunlight. which is referred to as photoperiodism. Photoperiodism, which is the response of an organism, response of an organism to the variation of day length, variation of the length of the day, or variation of the duration of the day. And hence long day plants are found in higher latitudes, and short day plants are found in tropical region. Now, another point we have to write is sunlight's effect on animals, direct and indirect. Now, we'll take an example. Some plants, some animals have indirect influence. In some animals, it frequently stimulates photoperiodic habits. Some animals, sunlight frequently stimulates photoperiodic habits, resulting in mostly reproduction and migration. Example, migratory birds, who migrate from one hemisphere, higher latitude to lower latitude, and vis-a-vis during different seasons. So summer season they will come towards summer season they would be at the higher latitudes, and winter season they will fly down towards the lower latitudes. So transmigratory birds, right? Indirectly, animals are affected by the effect of sunlight on vegetation and food availability. This can also be seen in the case of again migration, when in winter season again plants are dormant mostly, so they produce less food. Lack of food availability would mean what these species would migrate to lower latitudes, or either lower latitudes they would migrate, or they will go into something known as the hibernation or nestivation, right? Hibernation in that case. Now this is how we have seen in detail, like how sunlight is impacting animals and plants. Right. Now, temperature is another important factor which influences again the way plants and animals live, or the distribution. Now, the temperature's influence is again more influence is more on plants, because plants cannot survive without proper temperature, because mostly the issues, why do like the environmental factors influence plants the most? പറയാവോ? Yeah, because they have very low locomotive power. In fact, they are not locomotive mostly. They are fixed in one place. On the other hand, the animals can move, like the migration that is happening, right? So mostly the impact of temperature is mostly found in plants. Of that, aquatic, the impact of temperature is more on aquatic situation as far as maximum limit is concerned. For a terrestrial, mostly important is the minimal limit. Okay, slight increase in temperature will be very harmful for aquatic plants, because they are aquatic plants and animals for that matter. They can live in only a limited type of conditions, whereas the plants in terrestrial condition, they can, even if the temperature is high, if they get enough water to for transpiration, they will be fine. Okay, but for them, low temperature means freezing. Freezing will affect their cells, and will limit the transport of water and minerals, and that will again then lead to the physiological drought of plants. Plants will die off. So those are the main different ways in which temperature is affecting the plants. So we'll explain alongside writing. temperature, important factor of distributed plants. It is the minimum limit of the temperature which is more important for terrestrial plants. This is a minimum limit of temperature which is more important for terrestrial plants because they have a special mechanism of transpiration. Because they have special mechanism of transpiration through which they can cool themselves down and thus control the impact of higher temperature. On the other hand, aquatic plants are highly impacted by higher temperature. Even if 1 degree of increase would mean, even if an increase of 1 degree would mean damage for many aquatic plants. Now, why minimum temperature is important for terrestrial plants? Minimum temperature is important because there are critical limits below which photosynthesis would cease to operate. Critical limits below which photosynthesis would cease to operate. Lower temperatures would affect the ground conditions. Lower temperatures would affect the ground conditions where under frozen conditions, plants are unable to absorb water so they face physiological drought. Lower temperature can also lead to freezing of liquids in the cells of the plants. So in order to survive in the harsh cold climates, plants which survive in the harsh cold climates are of two types. That is the annual plants. Like grasses, which completes their life cycle in a short growing season in polar summers. In a short growing season in polar summers, and survive as seeds till the next growing season. So basically, these are plants which grow just for the what you call as this summer period when the ice melts. That is for 2 or 3 months. That's it. So they are annual plants. Perennial plants like conifer trees. Perennial plants like coniferous trees adopt their state of dormancy to overcome the extreme winter conditions. Now, when it comes to animals, that is mainly two type. Animals have to regulate their temperature within the body. It could be animals could be of two type, that is cold-blooded or warm-blooded. cold-blooded animals will not be able to regulate their body temperature, whereas warm-blooded animals will be able to modulate their body temperature. And let's see how they survive these conditions. So animals plays temperature also plays an important role in the distribution of animals. And their impact varies with their nature of cold-blooded or warm-blooded, their cold-blooded or warm-blooded nature. Cold-blooded or warm-blooded nature. Cold-blooded animals are more affected by temperature changes as they occur. The same temperature as their body occur, the temperature of their surroundings, and can't regulate and are unable to regulate the body temperature like warm-blooded animals. Such animals adopt hibernation, that is long winter sleeps, where they lie in dormant state by virtually halting the metabolic process. So they'll just go and find some areas which is little more warmer, maybe a cave, maybe some other place, and they just sleep there. One thing is that they won't get food to eat even if they wake up. So and when they go into hibernation, their bodily activity will be just minimal. So maybe breathing, that's it, nothing more than that. So they will not require much of energy. So in fact, it's not because they don't require it, but food is not available and extreme low temperature is there, so they just go into hibernation. The opposite of that can be seen in the case of estivation, which you find in the case of hot desertic conditions, estivation. Now warm-blooded animals resort to physiological changes. Warm-blooded animals, on the other hand, resorts to physiological changes. Like they develop body hair, they would develop body hairs, layer of fat, which can store food in the body to survive winter condition. So there will be larger animals mostly, which can show, one would be the hair, the large body fur would be there. It will give it a large appearance. Similarly, large fat deposition in the body will allow them to survive during winters. Okay. Now, the next point is water availability. Water availability, we know, like transpiration is very significant for plants. The water or the availability of water would determine what kind of plants they are. Several type of plants are there. For example, when you have studied about Koppen's classification, you might have read about megathems, xerophyte, mesothems, those kind of plants which are he identified the climate in fact based on the type of plants, and type of plants was predominantly based on the amount of rainfall you get. Megathems were found in the regions of high rainfall, mesothems in relatively lesser rainfall, and xerophytes came in between, which was the desert kind of condition. So plants is basically reflection of temperature and water. So we'll see what are the water conditions as far as plants are concerned. Okay. Plants and animal species have become specialized with respect to the access to or with respect to access to water resources. As for plants, they require water. As for plants, they require water to transport and absorb nutrients from soil. Absorb nutrients from soil. As a result, specialist plants have developed, like first one, xerophytes. Xerophytes, which are plants grown in drought-like conditions. Drought-like conditions. In fact, this was asked in prelims also once. So they have several features. One, reduced leaf surface, thorny leaves, hard, glossy leaves, waxy secretions, all to reduce, loss of water, growth of deep roots, obviously to find water from the groundwater table. Right. So that is one type of plant. The next one is hygrophytes. Excuse me. Hygrophytes are plants which are adapted to water surplus condition. Commonly found in shallow streams, lake, marshes, swamps, etc. Lakes, water, lakes, rivers, river basins. Mesophytes is the next one. Mesophytes grows under average but not extensive water conditions, water availability. They are commonly found in upland regions of fair precipitation, where drainage is good. Drainage കൊള്ളത്തില്ലാത്തതാണ് പൊതുവെ നമുക്ക് ഹൈഗ്രോഫൈറ്റ്സ് ഇടുന്നത് വാട്ടർ കെട്ടിക്കിടക്കുന്ന സ്ഥലം ഉണ്ടാവും ചിലപ്പോൾ. Right. So in this case, they grow in regions where fair availability of sufficient availability of precipitation or humidity is there, and the drainage is also not defective. Right. And mesophytes have wide range of tolerance. For animals, water availability is limiting factor. For animals, water availability is a limiting factor when it is in short supply. Warm-blooded animals will be more affected. Warm-blooded animals will be more affected because they require large amount of water or sufficient amount of water to regulate their body temperature. Okay, and എങ്ങനെയാണ് body temperature regulate ചെയ്യുന്നത്? Because it is through the use of water. Respiration is being one example. And when there is not much water availability under desert conditions, cold-blooded animals are found. Cold-blooded animals are found like reptiles, insects, etc. They would also develop behavioral adaptation mechanisms like extivation and nocturnal habits. Extivation and nocturnal habits. Okay, so that are some of the behavioral adaptations that plants go into. Right, that's mostly the environmental factors. Soil and slope factors also play some role. For example, in some soils, uh, okay, just write a few more, two more lines. Other factors include non-zonal environmental factors, like these are zonal environmental factors in the sense that all these three are dependent upon what? Latitude, temperature, water, and sunlight. Their changes with latitude. Some latitude will be having plentiful, like for example, the lower latitude, the equatorial latitude will be having all these three in plentiful nature. Whereas the subtropical one, you will find water generally scarce. And as we go into the polar region, you will see all the three to be in very low quantity. So that is the zonal nature. Like, okay. Now, the non-zonal environmental factors include soil and topography. Okay. Now, soil, the substrate conditions of soil over which plants are located. Soil over which plants are located. Influence plants, plant assemblage through texture of the soil, structure of the soil, nutrients involved in the soil, etc. So we know this is basically agriculture we're talking about, right? So some soil, different type of plants are there. Some plants grow even on rocks. Some plants grow just in only in fertile soil. Some grow in alkaline soil. Some grow in marshy soils. Different plants are there. So we've seen that already. With respect to animals, soil plays an important role in distribution of microbes. Okay, otherwise plants are not dependent upon, sorry, animals are not dependent upon uh, what? Not dependent upon soil. Now the next one is topography. Topography is reflected in three forms. The influence of topography is reflected in three forms. That is altitude, aspect, and inclination of the slope. Altitude, aspect, and inclination of the slope. Altitude controls predominantly controls environmental conditions such as altitude controls environmental conditions such as especially temperature and precipitation. Okay, temperature controls, altitude controls, so conditions of temperature and precipitation, because you know, like as to go into the higher elevations, you see lesser temperature, lower temperature, and lesser rainfall. So that's why you see even in tropical regions you will see polar vegetation, as we see in the case of Himalayas. So we know aspect is the direction of the slope. Aspect is the direction of the slope. It controls the direction of the slope, controls temperature and again water availability. In northern hemisphere, southern slope receives greater sunlight compared to the in northern hemisphere, southern slope receives greater sunlight in comparison to the northern slopes. Okay. Now the next one is inclination of slope. The inclination of slope plays an important role in distribution of plants through, again, availability of water and thickness of soil. Right. Again, we know like why, because water, we know in steep slopes, water availability will be less. Water groundwater table will be very low. Water runoff will be very high. Whereas on the lower slopes or gently sloping or defective slopes, you will see water logging. The groundwater table will also be high. So water logging would be the condition. Thickness of soil, obviously, we know like in plain region, soil will be more thicker, more fertile, whereas skeletal soils are found around above the mountainous ranges. So these things we already studied. So I think we have covered that. Now the next important factor that determines the let me clarify a bit. We have environmental factors, and that they provide what optimum conditions for the growth of plants and animals. Say you need a tropical temperature and about greater than 100 centimeter of rainfall. Suppose a plant A needs that. Okay. Now there may be plant A, plant B, plant C, plant D. Different type of plants are there. Now say plant B is also requiring this condition only, but less fertile soil. It will go even in less fertile soil. Suppose an additional component, that is fertility of the soil is low. Maybe the soil is in red and yellow soil. So which one would go here? Had there been only A, it would have grown in the what red and yellow soil, no issue. But here there is B and C and D, and B is comparatively more suited for low fertile conditions. Now this happens is that although environmental factors are very significant, most of the time competition, there is competition between different species. So environmental factors does not mean that we're in a particular region a particularly suited crop will grow, or rather a crop will grow in its, or a plant or animal would grow in its most suited conditions only. No, it's nothing like that. There are other factors which are at play. So that are the factors we are seeing: biological factors, historical factors, accidental factors, all contribute to the way environmental distribution is concerned. So mostly you would say like what most of the time plants or animals are not found in their optimum conditions, but somewhere within that range of tolerance എവിടെയായിരിക്കും കാണും, optimum condition കാണും നമുക്ക് ഒപ്പ് പറയാൻ പറ്റത്തില്ല. Okay, so അതിലൊരു പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട കാര്യമാണ് ബയോളജിക്കൽ ഫാക്ടേഴ്സ്. ഹൗ ഡിഫറെന്റ് നമ്മൾ പഠിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്, symbiosis, all those things, mutualism, all those things. So we are going to write about that. So how the interaction between different biotic elements, plants and animals interact, and their interaction would determine the location, the distribution of animals and plants. We know like കുറച്ചും കൂടെ familiar ആയിട്ടുള്ള കാര്യമാണ്. We'll write biological factors are resultant of interaction between the species. Biological factors are a resultant of an interaction between the species. The species interact because range of tolerance of species are often overlapping. So I think we don't have to write much about this, because these things we know, parasitism, mutualism, these are things that we know. So basically we will see mostly they are of two type. The biotic interactions are of two type, that is of symbiosis and competition. Right, symbiosis and competition. Symbiosis is a beneficial or positive interaction between species. It can achieve variety of forms like commensalism, where two live without harming each other. Two live. Okay, so that is not necessarily because symbiosis, right? So commensalism, where one obtains advantage and the other is unaffected. In commensalism, one obtains advantage and the other is unaffected. The next one is photo cooperation, where both receives advantage, but the advantage is not essential to their existence. Next one is mutualism, where both derive advantages and their survival depends upon it. For example, Susan-Delay and coral. The best example is Susan-Delay and coral. Without coral, Susan-Delay cannot survive. Without Susan-Delay, corals cannot survive. Right. The next one is competition, which is a negative form of interaction which occurs between plants and animals. Again, we know this thing. Forms include predation, parasitism. The best example is the predation between man and animal. Like elephants used to live across India, across the forests of India earlier, but now these are restricted to a few national parks, which you find in the case of Western Ghats, some in the Eastern Ghats, some in the hills of the central India. Besides that, elephants are not found anymore. So that is predation. Okay. And there are other forms like allelopathy, where plants try to strive off their harmful things that is harmful their predators. That is allelopathy. So again, you can read that on your own. Like it's not a big topic which we are studying in GS. GS കാണുന്ന ഒരു ടോപ്പിക്കാണ് biotic interaction എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ topic. So that is simple. Then the next factor, biotic interaction. അതിനുശേഷം biotic interaction ശേഷം വരുന്ന third element is what? Accidents or disturbances. There are several factors, disturbances that is arising in the what you call us in the biosphere, which are in a way, in sometimes it is determined to one form of life and aids the dominance of other forms of life. For example, there was like dinosaurs once upon a time there, or other call us reptiles dominated the world at one point of time. Then it becomes the mammals. Similarly, if you look at accidents, if you look at accident as an example, if you would know fire. Fire is an accident that occurs in savanna climate, and it helps it regulates growth of plants. Because of fire climax, plants are not able to grow. Only grasses grow, and also it helps to prevent of influence of other invasive species. Mostly we'll remember the example of plants. That's enough. Similarly, there is pathogens. That is again accident. These are not regular occurrences like the competition we've seen in the case of biotic interaction. We've seen biotic interaction, right? Or we have seen environmental factors like plants sunlight, temperature. These are day after day, these are occurring there. It's a regular phenomena, but these accidents or disturbances are not regular. They happen once in a while and makes its larger impact. So we'll write a few things about the factor of disturbance. Disturbances are an event. Disturbance is an event that disrupts an ecosystem through physical or biological processes. Physical disturbances include winds, fire, flood, etc. There can be biological disturbances like pests, pathogens, other activities of other living beings like animals, humans. Physical disturbances are considered as external agencies. So using can be considered as external agencies, while biological disturbances are internal. For example, savanna ecosystems are formed due to fire subclimax. Okay. Savanna vegetation are formed through fire subclimax. Climax area, like you might have heard about. We'll see that in environmental geography. The process of environmental succession. So climax is the last kind of group, and mostly it is a forest that develops in a particular area. But in savanna region, you don't see forest because of different subclimaxes. One is fire subclimax in the case of disturbance. Okay, so in savanna, grassland is occurred through fire subclimax. Occasionally, in every year, there are forest fires. There are forest fires that burns trees and open the area for grass invasions. Okay, this is been in the case of Mediterranean region. Again, fires are there. Solely shrubs grows there. Okay, so it can be positive or negative. We are not going to that. Now, as far as biological disturbances are pathogens, they induce diseases, and thus, one example I can give is the myrtle rust. Myrtle rust. Okay, myrtle rust that is found in Australia. It has transformed from South America to Australia, and in Australia it becomes infectious, and it is wiping out the. It's a very large ecological threat to the vegetation of Australia. It affects eucalyptus, which is mostly about 80% of Australian vegetation is eucalyptus, consists of eucalyptus trees, and they are a pathogen to eucalyptus trees. Though the vegetation of Australia is under threat from this pathogen, myrtle rust. Similarly, there is entire species maybe goes out. One example I can tell you is the American chestnut. About a large area of American forest was covered by American chestnut, which got wiped out due to a disease. In about 30 to 40 years, this same region was devoid of American chestnut trees. So sometimes does happen. That is accidental, right? Not because of accidents, a species can be eliminated, and a different species can come up or dominate the region. Okay. Now we have seen both the factors. We'll just slightly see the historical factors. We have mentioned that there was two kind of factors. What is the general factor? The second one is the regional or historical factors. Now this determines the general factors would basically determine the different type of species that are there. So environmental factors sets the baseline. We cannot go beyond the environmental factors, the range, especially beyond the range. Biotic interaction would make some places suited for some because of the competition. Every species cannot grow in every region. Then you have the disturbances, that is what is the accidental occurrence. Now, besides that, there are several regional historical factors which has led to this kind of a situation is there. Now, this situation, the animals assemblage which are there. For example, take the case of Gondwana land. There would have been number of species in Gondwana land or in Pangaea. They would have been evolving like that. But as a part of continental drift, each continent moved from one away from each other. Now that will what lead to separate kind of speciation. The speciation that happens in Africa would be different from Asia. Maybe Madagascar and Indian coast were together earlier. So history, the animal assemblage would have been similar. But since now they are far away from each other, the things happening in Madagascar is not related to things happening in India. So the species is different. Now suppose extinction is happening, that is different. Now suppose dispersal is happening between Madagascar and India. If dispersion is there, there would be a particular type of animal assemblage. If dispersion is not there, there will be a different type of animal assemblage. So that is what regional factors are. We have to see that. Okay. Now in regional factors, first to consider should be one of the most important factors, the continental drift. In fact, phenomena like climate change is the one major factor. Okay. Okay. So several such things are occurred in the past. Few being the continental drift and climate change. We don't want to go into that too deep detail. But let's see how these phenomena have in fact impacted, how these historical factors have impacted the different processes that was there. Okay. Now first one we have several factors were there. One is continental drift. The one is mostly climate change was a major impact that produced this particular condition. Okay. And then this can be considered as large scale disruption. These are all short or small scale disruption that is happening, but the impact of these two, continental drift and climate change, has been global, and huge differentiation has been brought about by that. So some of the impact of these historical factors were like, if you look at first one is speciation. Okay, let's write a few words about that. We know like what is speciation is like. It is a process through which new species arise and they are maintained. New species arise and they are maintained. They are related with the genome of the species, that is the total genetic information and the changes brought about in that. And that species is a group of organisms which can interbreed among themselves mutation is a kind of error which can occur. So species is basically this one is there are maybe a couple of species in a particular region, and because of several reasons, the species will diverge from each other and new species will be created by accident. Sometimes a species which does not interbreed would interbreed, and that would then lead to development of a new species. Okay, so that's why the idea of speciation. So in a region when there is new species are being created in that region would become say Africa and India were together, then they both drifted apart, and new species developed in Africa. That would mean the assemblage of plants and animals in Africa would be different from Asia. So we are looking at the distribution and how this distribution is there. So obviously that would be that will lead to a different distribution, right? So mutation is a kind of error which can occur as a result of mutation is a kind of error which can occur as a result of biotic accidents or environmental accidents. That can also be there because environmental condition changes. Genetic information is passed on from generation to generation. But sometimes the information is not passed from one generation to the other properly. And would eventually lead to, and then it would eventually lead to speciation, to a new speciation, or a new speciation, or a new species would be created. When different species are there, natural selection takes place between different species. The species with advantageous genes will interbreed among themselves and will lead to the evolution of, and will lead to their survival. Whereas disadvantages where animals with or organisms with disadvantageous genes will become extinct. So that can be seen in the case of when you look at when an invasive species comes in. For example, the African mushi in India, നമ്മുടെ ഒരു കുളത്തിൽ കൊണ്ടിട്ട് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ അത് വേറൊരു മീൻ അവസാനം കാണത്തില്ല. This particular African mushi has genes which are make it superior for that particular circumstances, and there would be no like threat to them, and they'll survive over the rest of the organisms in that region. So that's why we are often people are concerned about the idea of invasive species. Okay. So speciation would be happening like that. Let that be there. We don't have to go into the details of speciation. The next we can look into is extinction phenomenon. So speciation would develop what? New species and new combinations of species in a particular region. So the genetic makeup or the population of organisms or living organisms in that particular region changes. Now the next one is extinction phenomenon. Extinction refers to death of a species, which is a rule rather than exception. Extinction is an exceptional phenomena. It's a normal phenomena where some species would survive and the other species would extinct based on the natural selection. So it's a rule rather than exception. There can be two types of extinction. There could be local extinction, global extinction, or rather three kinds of extinction. That is global itself, but mass extinction. So this one means loss of species from a particular place. Okay, for example, cheetah is not found in the India anymore. It is found only in Africa, right? So that is extinction of local extinction. Then there will be global extinction. Total loss of a particular gene pool or a species. For example, mammoth is not there anymore. Tasmanian tiger in the Tasman island of Australia, that is not found anymore. Now there is mass extinction. Mass extinction refers to catastrophic loss of substantial portion of world species. So we are into എത്രാമത്തെ mass extinction ലേക്കാണ് climate change ആണ് നമ്മൾ പോയിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നത്. Mass extinction എത്രാമത്തെയാണ്? Don't know. Even there was previous year UPSC question in that. See, environmental പഠിക്കുന്നതാണല്ലോ mass extinction. There have been 5 instances of mass extinction where like large number of species have died. So one was there in the Cretaceous period when the sea level risen, and there was one in the Pleistocene when during the Ice Age again several organisms have died. And recently, when we say like loss of biodiversity in the context of climate change, we are saying that about a huge number of species that we see today can go extinct, right? Because the climatic conditions are changing, the living conditions are changing, and for example, we have seen coral facing extinction. Corals are facing extinction. There several species are running out of their number. All these are not happening for a couple of or 3 or 4 individual species, but they are happening across board for large number of species. So for example, the number of bees are decreasing, the number of especially insects are facing threat, mammals, some of the large mammals are facing threat. So that is what you mean by mass extinction. Catastrophic loss of substantial portion of world species. Okay. And the rate of extinction here is multiple times higher than the normal rate of extinction. Okay. Then we can look into the dispersal phenomena. So these are 2 things that is happening. So either a species is created or a species is destroyed. Now third one, so we have given an example, right? For extinction, if you look at kangaroo or rather marsupials are the what you call as the predators of mammals. What type of mammals you can say? But that they got extinct in other parts of the world, all other parts of the world, but for Australia, and a few numbers in Argentina, or rather the southern South America, southern South America. But all other parts, there is no such thing as marsupial present anymore. But Australia is purely made up of all those species. So what we see here is that extinction has happened in large numbers in these marsupial, which was primitive mammals, got replaced by higher order mammals. Right, that is extinction for you. Now there is idea of dispersal. Now Australia is composed of only marsupials, and they do not have higher order mammals because they are far away from the larger continents, and mammals cannot just pack up their bag and go to Australia. They cannot do that. But after human settlements in Australia, things are changing. For example, rabbits are being introduced into Australia. Pigs are coming in. Rabbits are one of the major invasive species. We would never consider rabbits as invasive species here, but rabbits are invasive species in Australia, because here rabbits is not an invasive species because there are different organisms, different carnivores who will eat rabbits. But in the case of Australia, rabbit would be the higher order mammal, the most significant mammal there. Nobody is going to come and eat rabbits. So the rabbits would grow in number and grow in number and grow in number. Now what will happen when rabbits grow in number? They will obviously eat. They will eat more and more and more in grass. All the grass മൊത്തം കഴിച്ചു കഴിയും. So grass when all the grasses are destroyed, the ground cover will be destroyed. The land will turn without grass. Grasses will not be there, and then will happen. Then rain will come, erosion will happen, topsoil will be removed, and the entire region become desert-like, desertification. So that's in impact of invasive species. Now, it does not mean that invasive species is a harmful thing. Invasive species is a harmful thing only in short term. In the long term, the world works like this. So the second idea that we are talking about is dispersal. Even in India, to different species. They are a function of dispersal. Now, dispersal is also a factor. So, if you look at our plants, some of the plants, say wheat, say potato, ഇതൊന്നും ഇവിടെ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്ന സംഭവമല്ല. ഇന്ത്യയിൽ ഇതൊന്നും ഇല്ലായിരുന്നു. Especially potato. Potato എവിടെ നിന്നാണ് വരുന്നത്? Even North America, even in Europe, there was nothing called as potato. Potato was brought about by ഏത് സമയത്താണ് പൊട്ടറ്റോ ഇന്ത്യയിലോട്ടൊക്കെ വരുന്നത്?
Portuguese.
Yeah, it was during the colonial times, the Portuguese and the other people who went to South America and North America, to the Americas, mostly South America. It is they who bought these kind of crops from there to here. So that is basically dispersal. Now this is human anthropogenic dispersal. Dispersal അല്ലാതെ തന്നെ സംഭവിക്കുന്നുണ്ട് from one either dispersal or the lack of dispersal would lead to what? A particular species concentrated in one region. Specialization. Right. So we'll write that. Dispersal is an ecological process. Dispersal is an ecological process that involves movement of individual or multiple individuals from their population or natural habitats to new locations where they would settle and reproduce. It is different from seasonal migration, which do not involve colonization of new areas. It is different from seasonal migration, which does not involve colonization of new areas outside the species range. Migration is a to and fro movement within the species range. So when a bird is migrating, its species range is like it is that. Now, but if an elephant is migrating from Africa to India over centuries, that is not the. By the time it gets to India, over generations, the nature of that particular elephant would have changed altogether. So it would become two species. So we have the African elephant, which is different, which has lesser size, bigger ears, and which is where the Indian elephant, which is more bigger, more something the thought of the sort that we see. So when you say elephant, both are these two species of elephants. So that way. Dispersion can occur in at least 3 different ways. Jump dispersion, that is rapid transit of individual organism across large distance to new terrains. Diffusion, it is relatively a gradual spread of population across. It is relatively gradual spread of population across hospitable terrain. Jump dispersion is often across inhospitable terrain. Diffusion is across hospitable terrain, or taking place over many generations. Okay, and there is secular migration, that is which is taking over very slowly, so slowly that the species undergoes evolutionary change while the dispersal is taking place. Okay, by the time the species arrives in a new region, the species arrives in a new region, it would differ from its ancestor population in the source area. Now there are routes of dispersal and barriers to dispersal. There can be corridors of dispersion and there will be barriers to dispersion. Something barriers include, barriers can be natural or man-made. Just list down a couple of them, you would know it easily. Largest of natural barriers are oceans, right? Oceans are the largest barriers, and obviously you will see when you come to it, you would see uh, special different distribution species mostly different with respect to continents. So that ocean is the largest one. Mountains, deserts, large rivers, few things, and man-made barriers like urban areas, infrastructure buildings, or buildings or infrastructure are again what barrier to dispersal. When you look at dispersal or routes, you can see corridors, stepping stone islands. For example, if you're moving from Indonesia to Australia, you have lots of islands there. Indonesia is there, Papua New Guinea is there, and several small islands, Borneo Islands are there. So you can move through these islands and then eventually, over a period of time, get to Australia. So that's how some of the species, some of the rats and things like that have moved from Asia to Australia over a long period of time. So then there is periodical land bridges. Okay, for example, so we have seen stepping stone islands. We have corridors. Corridors, so you obviously know what is corridor. No. Now take the case of Europe, no, Eurasia, and America. Now these are two regions which are situated far away from each other. But sometimes in historical period there is the Aleutian Islands. Now they, as of now, it is underwater. But during Ice Age, what will happen? Ice Age, sea level drops. Like water will be converted to ice. When sea level drops, these become what? Stepping stone islands. Now they are not, but when water level drops, these islands will be above the land level and things will move from here to here. Now, in fact, most of the species that is found today in the North America and South America, North America and Eurasia are the same because of this interaction between these two regions. Obviously, if you look at the coniferous trees, the vegetation of higher latitudes basically is same across. About 4 or 5 species are there, which is spread across North America, the Canada, Siberia, Scandinavia, because they travel from one over to the each other, away from to the both sides. Yeah. Okay, so these are some of the. So again, continental drift is there. Continental drift is a form of dispersion. Okay. So we have completed the factors that are affecting distribution of species. So we know like environmental factors are there. The primary factors environmental. They are modified by what? Biotic interaction. They are modified by some accidental incidences. And then within a region, historical evolution of species itself. Evolution of species characterized by speciation, extinction, and dispersion would be resulting into formation of particular patterns of distribution. Okay, a particular type of animal would be found in one region, a particular kind of animal would be found in another region. Okay, so now our next study is how to understand this distribution. Okay, what is it like a cosmopolitan distribution where every type of species, be it plants or animals, are found across the world? Certainly, Chala species are found across the world. For example, crow. കാക്ക എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ സാധനം ട്രോപ്പിക്കലിലും ഉണ്ട്, അതുപോലെ തന്നെ polar regions ഉണ്ട്. Similarly, you would find several other species. Insects, snakes are found across the world. On the other hand, if you look at some of the species, like they are endemic to some regions, they are found only in few regions, maybe only in one region, not anywhere else. Again, the example of kangaroo is the best example, right? Zebra, another example. So giraffe, another example. naturally occurring as well in Africa. So there are the different patterns in which these organisms are distributed: cosmopolitan distribution, endemic distribution, and when we studied that, we finally understood that endemism, species distribution, is not random. It is not randomly found in some region. There is provincialism. That is, in some region, some type of species are concentrated. Mostly species are endemic. Especially species like mammals are endemic to some region. They are found in one region, not found in far off regions. So you identified that there is a provincialism there. Endemic species, and there is some transitionary species between two regions and few cosmopolitan species. So we identified that based on endemism, different provinces of flora and fauna can be identified based on endemism. In certain region, you have certain characteristic assemblage of species which are not found elsewhere. So that region, so they are not randomly distributed. There are some reasons for its distribution. So some provinces can be identified. Now, this would lead to the zonal classification of flora and fauna, which is the next thing we have to study. Okay, so there will be floristic kingdoms, like different floristic kingdoms are there, different faunal kingdoms are there. One of the best example is the South American floristic and faunistic kingdom, Australian floristic and faunistic kingdom, which is hugely different from all other parts of the world. For example, Australia, if you look at, it's unlike other parts of the world, like where vegetation is mainly carried by 80% of eucalyptus trees. No higher order mammals were originally found. Now humans have introduced few, but higher order mammals are different, or are not found. Similarly, when you go to Africa also, South America also, you don't see higher order mammals there. Okay, normally, naturally occurring. Kudireo, alangi, what you call as something like a tiger or a lion. All these are not found. See, again, in lion's case, it's found only in two parts. Again, in the Indic region and in African region, not anywhere else. Tiger, on the other hand, is spread across more regions. So this is provincialism. We have to identify the different ways in which the world can be divided into different provinces. That's what we are looking at. Okay, so we'll look into the distribution. We have studied the factors. Distribution can be of two types, that is cosmopolitan distribution and endemism. Cosmopolitan distribution means, please write, cosmopolitan distribution refers to situation where species are present in species are found across different biotic regions. Now there is endemism. Endemism refers to species occurring only in one area and nowhere else. Endemism species can be endemic to geographical location. Species can be endemic to geographical location. Can be endemic to geographical location on a variety of spatial scales. At different taxonomic levels. A spatial case and different taxonomic levels. Okay. Yeah, all right. There can be endemism at family level, genera level, and species level. So some families are only found in one region. We talk about the kangaroos, right? In case of some genera is found in one region. Sometimes it is based only on species. For example, if you look at elephant, both the elephants of India and Africa relates to the same family, but different species. Similarly, tiger, different tigers are found in different parts of the world. Different species. Yeah, not family. Tiger is a single family, cat family. Okay. Now, endemism can be the result of two different reasons. Two different reasons. One, because the taxa, the species, the taxa, because the taxa originated in that place and never got dispersed. That's originated in that place and never got dispersed. Either because they would be poor dispersers, either they were poor dispersers, or the environmental conditions were not conducive for dispersion. Conducive for dispersion. Second one, because now they survive only in small part of their former range. Because they survive only in a former part of their range. We have given numerous examples. Okay. In a cosmopolitan location on the cosmopolitan location is when organisms are found widely dispersed throughout the world. Okay, yeah, so examples for cosmopolitanism include rodents, birds, bats, etc. So normally birds are cosmopolitan highly because they have the high locomotive power. So the barriers of dispersal like oceans doesn't really matter to them. So birds are a best example of cosmopolitan location. Now there's another zone that is disjunction location. Disjunct location. It's a type of locational attribute where closely related organisms occur along a widely distributed area, widely separated area. So if you look at South America as such, something called as southern beaches, which is a kind of plant, are found in the South America, in Antarctica, Antarctic coast. Why? Because they used to be separate together earlier, and then they separated, and you have what do you call us this kind of a distribution. So we have seen cosmopolitan distribution, we have seen endemic distribution, we have seen disjunct locations. Now there is transitionary zones. Species distribution, the way species are distributed. Now there is transition zones. These are regions where one biogeographical region grades into another one. Now if you look at again the Asian realm, this would be slowly getting into the Australian realm. So this would be what a transitionary zone. There are two type of assemblage in Australia, Austral realm, and in the Asian realm. So between that, similarly, if you look at India, or not India, just not just India, Africa, these would be the Saharan region would again be a transitionary zone where species variations are slowly occurring across a large area. So they are transitionary zone. Panama, Caribbean Island, Southeast Asia. Excuse me. All these are examples of transition zone. Now you have another one, that is island location. Island locations are small areas which display high degree of endemism. For example, if you look at again Africa, you have Madagascar, which in itself has huge variety of. Madagascar is a sub region within the African realm or the Oriental realm. So it has huge variety. Okay, it has with Africa is the Ethiopian realm, sorry, in floristic parlance. So within that African realm, Madagascar has huge number of diversity, huge number of endemic, unique species that is found there because of island location. So this is the way the different species are distributed around the world. Now that could be of two type. It could be of what? Just let me get the thought. It could be of two type, that is floristic and faunistic. നമുക്ക് രണ്ട് കാര്യങ്ങളാണ് പഠിക്കാനുള്ളത്. ഒന്ന് എങ്ങനെയാണ് how plants are distributed across the world, how animals are distributed across the world. Clear ആണോ ഇത്ര നേരത്തെ കാര്യങ്ങൾ? കുറച്ച് കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഒന്ന് പറഞ്ഞായിരുന്നു. Factors in distribution. Clear? Okay. Now the next one, I've already mentioned that endemic species are not randomly distributed in one particular location, or they are not either uniformly distributed in some region. Right? They're not uniform. They are not random. They are clumped together in some particular region. That what is known as provincialism, because the species are sometimes there are some species which are completely unrelated from the other provinces. Between, if say, let's take the case of South America and Africa, or for that matter, Africa or Asia, or Asia or Australia. There are few species, maybe a couple of species would be there which are completely unrelated. There is no familial bonding between the the two species that are found. Then you can say like that is provincialism. Okay, then there is some closely related species would be there, but overlapping ranges that can again contribute to provincialism. So provincialism can be understood in these two parts. So one is completely unrelated taxa, that is organism, and the second one is a region which have kind of overlapping similar kind of species. That would be provincialism for you. Now provincialism helps us to identify the different zones of distribution of animals. So the zones of the classification or zones or classification of the globe into different zoobiological or faunistic floristic region is based upon the idea of provincialism. So we'll write a few things about provincialism. When ranges of organisms are examined closely, it can be seen that when ranges of organisms are examined closely, it can be seen that endemic forms are neither randomly nor uniformly distributed across the earth. Neither randomly nor uniformly distributed across the earth. But instead are clumped together in a particular region. This is the phenomena of provincialism. Now, this can be seen in three patterns. Provincialism in general can be seen in three patterns. First one, most closely related species tend to have overlapping or adjacent ranges within restricted parts of the continent. Adjacent ranges within the restricted parts of the continent. Second one, completely unrelated higher taxa where different species are found across a region. Completely unrelated higher taxa means just the the species and the families and things like that. Okay. Completely unrelated taxa found across regions. Third one is disjunct ranges. A small significant number of taxa where species distinct ranges, a small but significant number of taxa with species living in widely separated areas. Now then you go into the idea of biogeographic regions. Biogeographic regions are those which house geographical regions which house unique species, genera or families. These are evidences of historical barriers. These are evidences of historical barriers and corridors that have blocked or allowed dispersal between different parts of the world. Resulting in formation of such biogeographic regions. So the biogeographical region can be based upon on the idea of different hierarchies. There is a hierarchy of such biogeographical regions. There is a hierarchy of such biogeographical regions on the basis of the decreasing size. So the regions can be divided. For example, if you look at Ethiopian realm, that is Africa, can be divided into rainforest regions and savanna regions, and they further can be divided into different subunits. Okay, the floristic. Okay. എന്താണോ
പഠിപ്പിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന ടോപ്പിക്ക് തീരാറായോ?
എന്താ പറ്റി?
അല്ല, ക്ലാസ് വൈൻഡപ്പ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുമോ? മറ്റേത് നാളെ പൊളിറ്റിയായിരുന്നു ഞാൻ ലക്ഷ്മിക്കുട്ടിയുടെ.
അല്ല, എന്തായാലും ഞാൻ 3:45 വരെ എടുക്കാന്ന് ഓർത്തോണ്ടായിരുന്നു. ബിക്കോസ് കുറച്ച് ലേറ്റ് ആയി പോയത് തുടങ്ങാം. അൺഫോർച്ചുനേറ്റ്ലി ഐ തിങ്ക് ഈ ഒരു ടോപ്പിക് കഴിഞ്ഞു. ബിക്കോസ് ഇതിനു ശേഷം നമുക്ക് ആ റീജിയൻസും കൂടെ പഠിച്ചാൽ മതി. ഫ്ലോറിസ്റ്റിക് റീജിയൻസും ഫോണിസ്റ്റിക് റീജിയൻസും, പ്ലാന്റ്സിന്റെ ഡിസ്ട്രിബ്യൂഷൻ, ആനിമൽസിന്റെ ഡിസ്ട്രിബ്യൂഷൻ ഞാൻ നിർത്താറ്. ബിക്കോസ് അതിനിപ്പോ ഒരു 1.5 സെഷൻ കൊണ്ട്, 1.5 ഒരു 1/4 സെഷൻ കൊണ്ട് തീർക്കാവുന്നേ ഉള്ളൂ. 5-6 റീജിയൻസ് പഠിക്കണം. കുറച്ച് ഫാക്ച്വൽ ആയിട്ട് പഠിച്ചാൽ മതി. ഒരു മാപ്പും 2-3 കാര്യങ്ങളും പഠിക്കാം. ഞാൻ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ബ്രേക്ക് തരാം. അതായത് ആ ടോപ്പിക് എടുത്തു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഇന്ന് തീരില്ല. Okay, we will do that. Next day, okay. I should give an introduction to that already, but I'll just give an introduction. Like, so these studies were being carried out after the colonial, the scientific era and the colonial age. So when species were discovered, like new species are being discovered, and the geographers wanted to coordinate and classify them into it. And hence they started clubbing together the species which they seem to have close relations with each other. So when they went to Africa, they saw a different similar type of plants, similar type of animals. So mostly the classifications were made on the basis of, like, they took a region and looked for similarity in flowering plants. So based on the similarity of flowering plants, the floristic regions were delineated. So mostly the regions include North America and Europe together. Okay. So if you look at the floristic regions, North America and Europe occurs to be similar in nature. So that used to be the boreal system, the coniferous trees region. Similarly, you had the South American area, you have the African area, which is called by different names, Ethiopian, Cape. And South Africa was found to be a different one. India was there, Australia was there. This is the floristic region. Now, faunistic region is almost similar, but little more difference because of certain facts. Like in faunistic region, mammals were identified. Mammals were identified as the indicative species. So based on the type of mammals that you have, different regions were delineated. So you have the South American, you have the North American, you have the Eurasian, you have the Indian, you have the Ethiopian again, and the Austrian. So these were some of the regions, and there were different interpretations of it. Mostly, we go by in the case of floristry, we go by the name of geographer Wallace. So there are a couple of models which we follow when it comes to the floristic and floristic region. We will study that, and the demand of us, the expected demand is that we have to know 1 or 15 or 20 marker worth of a region, maybe 15 marker worth of a region, say Austral region, say South African region, South American region, which is known as neotropical. So neotropical region. അത്രയും കാര്യങ്ങളാണ് നമ്മൾ എക്സ്പെക്ട് ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ള അവിടുത്തെ കുറച്ച് ഫാക്ടേഴ്സ് കുറച്ച് അവിടുത്തെ so we may be asked to write about these regions. So if you are writing about Austral region, we have to talk about the climate of the region, you have to talk about the vegetation you are finding in that region, how that region came into existence, the origin of that region, and then you can look into the different type of endemic species found there, get to look up some of the cosmopolitan species that are found in that region, and some of the human interferences and the current issues faced in that region. Because if you are writing this much, you will get good marks in the zonal classifications of flora and fauna. That would be an easy topic, which very easily you can score good marks there. Okay, so I've given you the introduction, and the next day we'll start just straight looking into the different faunistic regions, and we'll first draw the map proper, and then we will write a few things on the different regions. By that we'll be able to, and then there is a small topic of biomes, not very difficult to study because it's mostly you study in the environment, you study in the geography. So we'll also look into it in a slight manner. We'll look into something which is not usually taken up in GS and study those things. So biomes are also asked. A couple of biomes are very important. For example, tropical rainforest biome is important. Savanna biome is important. Similarly, steppe biome, that is temperate grassland, is very important. Desert is kind of important, but the other biomes are not very important. We'll also probably look into coniferous. We'll see the few details of it, and then we'll be able to finish biogeography. Okay. So tomorrow, anyway, we'll finish biogeography. Probably we'll also take up environmental geography. So the next question is like, നാളെ എന്താ പരിപാടി? നാളെ എക്സാം ഉണ്ടോ?
നാളെ ഇന്ത്യൻ പൊളിറ്റിയാ.
ഓക്കെ.
അപ്പം ISP എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ പ്രോഗ്രാം ഇവിടെ തുടങ്ങിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. അപ്പം ആ സിലബസ് മൊത്തം പല ഡിവിഷനായിട്ട് സ്പ്ലിറ്റ് ചെയ്തിട്ട് ഓരോ ദിവസവും എക്സാം ആയിട്ടിടാം. സോ നാളെ അതിന്റെ ആദ്യത്തെ സെക്ഷൻ ആണ് ഇന്ത്യൻ പൊളിറ്റി, ആദ്യത്തെ സെക്ഷൻ.
നാളെ തുടങ്ങുന്നത്?
അല്ല, തുടങ്ങിയിട്ട് കുറെ നാളെ,
കുറച്ച് നാളായി. ഓക്കെ. പൊളിറ്റിയുടെ ആദ്യത്തെ സെക്ഷൻ. ഓക്കെ, അപ്പൊ നമ്മൾ എന്താ വെക്കുക നാളെ? അപ്പോ
ക്ലാസ് ആണോ?
ആ ക്ലാസ്സിന്റെ കാര്യം നാളെ വെക്കട്ടെ.
നാളെ വൈകിട്ട് വെച്ചു. അത് എല്ലാ ദിവസവും
നമുക്ക് 2-3 സെഷൻ മാക്സിമം, അതോടെ നമ്മൾ കംപ്ലീറ്റ് ചെയ്യും ജോഗ്രഫി. ഓക്കെ, അപ്പൊ നാളെ നമുക്ക് യൂഷ്വൽ ടൈം 6:30.
വൈകിട്ടത്തേക്ക് ആക്കണ്ടായിരിക്കും. നല്ല മഴ ഇടിയായോണ്ട് അന്നേരം കയറാൻ പറ്റിയെന്ന് വരില്ല. ഉച്ച സമയം കുഴപ്പമില്ലായിരുന്നു.
നാളെ എനിക്ക് വീട്ടിൽ പോകണം. പോരാ
നാളെ
നാളെ വീട്ടിൽ പോയാലെന്ന് ആലോചിച്ചിരിക്കുക.
വീട്ടിൽ പോയാൽ കയറാൻ പറ്റില്ലേ?
അല്ല, ഉച്ചക്കാണെങ്കിൽ കയറാൻ പറ്റത്തില്ല.
ഉച്ചക്ക് എനിക്കും
വൈകിട്ടായിരിക്കും നല്ലത്. കാരണം ഉച്ച തൊട്ട് വൈകുന്നേരം വരെ ശരിക്കും പഠിക്കാനുള്ള സമയം. 6 തൊട്ട് 8 വരെ എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഉഴപ്പുന്ന സമയം.
ബാക്കിയുള്ളവരും കൂടെ പറയണം. സിബിന് എന്താണ് പ്രശ്നം? റേഞ്ച് കുറവാണോ? അതാണ് പ്രശ്നം.
അതുകൊണ്ടല്ല, നല്ല മഴയൊക്കെ അല്ലേ ആ സമയത്ത്, കറണ്ട് ഒന്നും കാണിയല്ല ഹോസ്റ്റലിൽ.
നാളെ മഴ പ്രഡിക്ഷൻ ഉണ്ടോ? നാളെ വെച്ചാൽ അങ്ങ് പരിപാടി തീർക്കാം നമുക്ക് പെട്ടെന്ന്. ഇപ്പൊ 2 ദിവസത്തെ ക്ലാസ്സിന്റെ കാര്യങ്ങളിലേ ഉള്ളൂ. ബാക്കിയുള്ളവരുടെ അഭിപ്രായം? ഏഞ്ചൽ, ധന്യ, റോസ്.
സർ എന്തായാലും കുഴപ്പമില്ല. യൂഷ്വൽ ടൈം 6 to 8 ആയാലും കുഴപ്പമില്ല.
ഓക്കെ, എന്നാ പിന്നെ നമുക്ക് അങ്ങ് ഫിക്സ് ചെയ്യാം. നാളെ കൊണ്ട് അങ്ങ് തീർക്കാം. നാളെ 2 ദിവസം കൊണ്ട് അങ്ങ് തീർക്കാം. വെറുതെ പെട്ടെന്ന് അങ്ങ് തീർന്നിരിക്കുന്നല്ലേ നല്ലേ. Tomorrow rain ഉണ്ടോ? Tomorrow rain probability is very less. 40-50% maximum. ഇന്ന് rain percentage ഉണ്ട്. ഇന്ന് കുറച്ചും കൂടെ ഉണ്ട്. 80% വരെ ഉണ്ട്. ഇന്ന് ഉറപ്പായിട്ടും മഴ ഉണ്ട് പാലയിൽ. എന്നാണ് ഗൂഗിൾ പറയുന്നത്. നാളെ മഴ കുറവ്. ഓക്കെ, അപ്പോൾ എന്നാൽ നമുക്ക് നാളെ ഒന്ന് മീറ്റ് ചെയ്യാം. 6:30 വിൽ ഡിസ്കസ് 6:30 to 8:30. ആൻഡ്
സാർ 6 മണി തൊട്ട് 8 മണി വരെ
ആണോ വേണ്ടേ?
അപ്പൊ ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് ഇവിടെ ഫുഡിന്റെ അഡ്ജസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്യാനായിട്ട്.
Alright, we'll meet by 6. No problem. Okay. അപ്പോൾ ശരി. അപ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് നിർത്താം.
താങ്ക് യു സർ.
താങ്ക് യു സർ.
Thank
Okay,
you,
so
sir.
tomorrow 6 o'clock. Alright. Okay, bye.
Thank you, sir. Bye.